Hello and welcome to our second talk in the gallery at MongoDB.local London this year. We're super happy to welcome Alex Dixon from Realm here today. This is Alex's second talk, so I know it feels a little bit empty. I know there's more people on the way. We're going to talk about Realm. This will be a very technical session, so I hope you're comfortable with that. Alex will do some live coding. You don't have to do anything but sit back and enjoy. In terms of housekeeping, if you could rate the session at the end, that would be fantastic. You've got a feedback survey in the app or on your shed. Should you have done your schedule online. Otherwise, if you have any questions post-session, please feel free to pop to the MongoDB Stitch and Realm booth down in the expo hall. Alex will kindly hang around for about half an hour to answer any questions you might have. And with that, the floor is yours.
Cool, thank you. So I guess quite a few of you already saw my other talk. How many were at the other talk I did early in the morning? Well, still quite a few didn't see that. Okay, so I'll tell a little bit about myself again then. So my name is Alexander Dixon. I'm the founder of Realm, which is now part of the MongoDB family. I have a long mobile background. Before I did Realm, I used to work for Nokia for many, many years, doing all kinds of stuff of how to fit data into these small feature phones. And that naturally evolved into creating a modern mobile database. So just a quick recap before we get to some actual coding happening. Like, what is Realm? Realm is really two things, and we're going to show both of them in action today. One part is that it's a database. It's a native on-device database that actually runs embedded in your app on the device. So that's a pretty cool aspect, unique aspect, an object database. And at the same time, it's also a cloud service that allows a seamless synchronization between the cloud and all your mobile devices. So that's really what I want to show in action here today. And the really key thing here is the developer experience. And what I will try to show with this small code sample is show how simple it is to build stuff with Realm. I mean, how much it allows you not to code, which is the most interesting part. I mean, the best code in the world is code you don't have to write. That's really the best thing out there. And everything in Realm is designed to make things so simple as possible so that you don't have to write all this otherwise really, really complex code of how to interface to the cloud and how to deal with your data, how to deal with persistence, all that crap that we all otherwise can spend months and months on. So we try to make it just a seamless part of the language and then a total integration. So let's try to build an app. And what I want to do is I want to do a simple to-do app, something everybody can understand. But I'll make it so that it, at least in theory, would be collaborative and you could share between devices and all those things you would like to do with such an app. I'm going to do it for iOS. Have anybody tried to build a mobile app before? A few. How many have tried to build one on iOS? A little bit fewer, so not that many people. So it'll be a mobile app built in Swift for iOS. The good thing about Swift is that it looks like most modern languages. It's pretty straightforward, and I will kind of narrate as we go along with this. So let's get started. I'll cut this out here. There we go. And let's start just with Xcode. Can everybody see this on the screen? So with Xcode again is Apple's standard development IDE. So if you want to build an iOS app natively, that's pretty much what you have to use. And I can say from experience that they change things all the time. So just before this, I've done this talk before, and I kind of just rehearsed it. And of course, Apple had changed all kind of stuff that broke everything. So that's how it is. They change things all the time. That's just mobile development in a nutshell. So we'll try to create a new project here. And we'll just create what we call a single view app. That's a pretty simple one. And we'll call it MongoDB London. So that creates just kind of like a standard framework for an app. It doesn't really do anything, but you just have an app. Actually, this does a bit too much for what we want. So I'll clean it up a little bit. It uses something called storyboards, which is a kind of visual way to build apps that Apple has. We don't really need that. That's just going to add complication for this. So I'm going to just remove the storyboard references. There you go. And you need to remove references. This is just kind of a bit of cleanup so that we don't have to spend time on that. We can do that with code. And everybody out there, I mean, if you have questions along the way, just put up your hand. We can just handle it right in the middle of everything. If you're like, why did you do that? Or how does that work? That should be no problem. So now we have a skeleton app here. It doesn't really do anything. It'll basically, if I ran it now, it would just show a blank screen. The first thing we'll have to do is we have to get Realm into it. And every platform has their own way of doing this with package managers and all kind of things. The most common package manager in the iOS kind of environment is something called CocoaPods. And Realm supports all these different package managers, also the ones equivalent ones for Android and other platforms. So to get this in here, we will have to basically create a pod and then tell it that we want to use Realm Swift. So I just take the terminal and I'll kind of like move to where I just made my project. And then I'll just say pod init. So that's something that standard thing on Macs that you can initialize a CocoaPod. All that really does is it creates something called a pod file, which is a configuration about which libraries do you want to use in your app. So I can open that. Let's go here. And we open the pod file. Oop. This should be big enough that you can actually read what's going on. So it has a list of pods, and I'm just going to add like this as a pod Realm Swift. So that's the only library we need right now, just Realm. So we just add this as a pod. I'll save it, and then the only kind of slight complex thing is then I have to go back to my terminal, and then I'm gonna say pod install. So that's just kind of like a magic string you have to know. There we go. And that basically downloads Realm from the web. And this is where we have to look up the demo guards because Wi-Fi never works on when you do presentations. But it looks like we're okay. So there's a lot of mechanics happening here. The good thing is nothing that you have to worry about. The pod, it does all kind of stuff. It actually downloads Git repos and all kind of stuff. But it's all happened in the background. You don't have to worry about it. And then it creates everything you need to set up your whole project. And the only thing is that depending on how fast the Wi-Fi is, it can take some time. We look at this, and if we don't want to wait for this, I actually did a prepared one, just because I know that long sessions over Wi-Fi always fails. So let's not wait for this. So basically, I was smart enough to know that the Wi-Fi is probably slow, so I made a prepared version, just like the TV chefs when they do that. So let me just go here and just take the prep version here. So this is basically the same. It just downloaded these files. So let's try to run this. So when you create an app in this, you can run it locally. And as you can see out on the side, you'll see a simulator, which basically runs an iPhone. And now I ran the app, and clearly it is not really doing anything. It's just a black screen. That's not very interesting, but of course I haven't told it to do anything, so that's kind of obvious. So let's actually make it do something. So what we want is we really want it to connect to the Realm cloud. So the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to take the app delegate. Let's see if we can make this bigger here. So the app delegate in this is basically the main of a mobile app, iOS mobile app. So the first function it's going to call is something called did finish launching. So I'm basically going to replace this with a slightly different one that actually will show a new screen. So luckily I already made a shortcut for that. So this one is slightly different in that the only difference is that I'm actually going to create a window. Let's see here. And then I'm going to create a view controller as well. So what I wanted to open a new window so we actually have something that can happen. Let me check. I can see that I accidentally overwrote an identifier here. Let me just go back and open this. 2 seconds. I'm just quickly gonna recapture this that I just overwrote. It was a small, this one here. It's always messy when you accidentally delete stuff. Here we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a new window. It's called your window. Make sure that it's visible, and I want to make this a root view controller. Basically means this is the first one it's going to show. And then it's going to show what's called my view controller, which is the one I just made in this other file. And this view controller is basically just going to allow you to log in. So what it's going to show, when the view appears, it does a few different things, but when the view appears, it will call this method. And it will check, it will show like just a welcome title, so that's not that interesting. But then it will look if we have a current sync user. So you say, this kind of comes out of nowhere. Where does this come from? Well, the sync user is a kind of global constant for Realm. So this is like the sync user class allows you to have multiple users, and the current is whoever is currently connected. And the cool thing about this is a persistent variable. So if you log in, if you create a user, you log in, and the app gets shut down for whatever reason, when the app gets started up again, this user will still be logged in and connected. So you don't have to re-log in again. That's all handled for you. So the first thing, it just checks, do I have a current user? In this case, it will not have it because we haven't logged anybody in. So there's really nothing to do here. But if you have it, he will just log him in, call the onLogin. If we do not have a sync user, then it will show like an alert controller, which is a small pop-up, and say log into Realm Cloud and supply a nice nickname. I'm cheating a little bit here because you can do all kind of authentication with Realm, username, passwords, and JVT tokens, all kind of stuff. I'm using something that you have to especially enable. It's deprecated if you're not enabling it, which is something called nickname, which is basically just a login without a password. So I'm just doing this to make it simple. But basically, it'll add this action where you can log in, you can give a credential, and then we'll log in. And if it works, it will go down and it will call the onLogging method here, which will basically say, hey, success, you logged in. So let's try this and see how we can do this. Let's do this. Just build it. And we will see. Much action so far. I think I'm going to check remove. And we're trying to connect. And we'll have to see what happens. Right now it seems like it's just blanking for whatever reason. Let's try on a different device, just to force a rebuild. And it is launching slowly. You can see I started up a different simulator just to try it on a smaller device. So it still seems for unknown reasons that it's basically showing nothing. It's obviously annoying. we'll try to see if we can debug it then. So from what I can see, again, it seems to be an Xcode issue since it's not giving any output in Xcode. Well, it's kind of. No, this is an all-new simulator. And again, it should tell you in Xcode it should say if there was any error, but it's basically not giving any output. So I said, like, Apple just did an Xcode update, which broke almost everything, which is really annoying. But that's also what makes it interesting. So clearly something is broken in this Xcode that wasn't even broken yesterday, which is kind of annoying. But we just have to find a way to work around it. This is all correct. So, well, you know what? Since I can find a way around this. The good thing is that since they did changes, I did spend the time to actually make a fully working version yesterday. So we will try that instead. Do it like this, clean up this one. So that's how it always is with the demo arts, especially when you have an unstable environment where it gets updated underneath you, which sadly the mobile environment often is. So let's instead try this one here. Here we go. So we actually got Hulthu. So this is kind of like the TV chef version where I'm cheating because I'm using what I got to work yesterday. But apparently the Xcode has been updated and they broke something, which is really annoying. So this one is cheating because it's jumping ahead and things. I'll just show you what the code actually does. But when you have a Realm client, you can log in with a nickname. So I can basically choose some name, and in this case, let's say I'm choosing myself, calling myself John, and I'm going to log in. And again, this is jumping ahead of the time, so this is code I would kind of gradually build up instead of I'm going to tell you about it, because now we have some window work and we don't have to like fiddle with Xcode, and which is clearly very unstable right now. So what happened is that I created this. We got the login happening. Let me show the exact code where that happens. In our view controller here, we went in, we connected this one. And then when it was done, it called onLogin. And what onLogin did was it pushed a new navigation controller. So it's called the project view controller. And if you see this one, this is here. And the view controller here is actually relatively simple. It's not that much code. What it does is it shows just a single list, which out here you could see this is the list of potential projects or to-do lists you have. And then it binds this actually to a Realm list of projects. So this is the interesting part here, where it will, let me resize this a little bit here. So it does a query here. So first it does here, it opens the Realm, basically say, for this, the current user, get the default configuration. So we'll get what we call like the default realm. And with realms, you can have as many realms as you want. I mean, in principle in the app, you could have 10 realms opened, you could have like 20 realms opened. But sometimes you just want to simplify everything, and we have one that's just a default realm that if you don't specify a name, it'll just open that one. So that's what this happens in this next line. It basically says, give me the default realm based on the current user. And then it does a query on this. Say this is the projects. I want my list of projects, and basically say, find all projects where the owner is equal the current user. And you say, what projects? What are that? Well, those projects are something I have defined in my models. So they're defined basically just as standard classes. So what you'll see here is that we have two classes defined here. One is the project, and one is individual items for this project. So the first one, the interesting one, because that's what we show in the project list, was that the project has a project ID, and we just give it a default UID. And actually, one difference between Mongo and Realm is that in Realm, objects don't really need to have IDs. They can have IDs, they can work as primary keys and things, but just like you in your programming language, you don't really have to give every object an ID. You can just create an object and it'll just be an object. There's nothing special there. But in this case, we do give it an ID, and we do make it the primary key as well. This is how you define that this is the primary key. Then we have an owner, and we have the name for the project and a timestamp. And then we have a list of items. So every project contains a list of items. And if you go down here and see what is an item, again, it has an item ID. Also has a body, which is like the description. And it has, is it done or not, and a timestamp. So that kind of makes a little bit more context of what do we see in this project view controller. So it basically searches, again, for all the projects where the owner is equal to the current one. So that means that we already have the beginning of collaboration, that having this full list of projects, the default realm will contain every project out there, no matter who made it. You can search and you'll just synchronize out the ones that actually are your projects. And if we had more time, we could actually make it so that you could share projects between each other and say, oh, this project, I want my wife to also have access to that shopping list, or whatever you want to do. So what we do is we subscribe to this, which means that we want to get all the updates as they happen, and then we connect it to the UI. So this is actually the code that connects it to the UI. There's a standard protocol for a table view, which is the UI element you saw with the list. And it needs to get told basically what got inserted, what got deleted, and what got updated. And Realm is designed so that it fits exactly into that. It gives all the information it needs to give the exact updates. So that's just one little piece of code you put in, and it's basically standard. You can almost copy-paste that, and then you have bound the data source directly to the UI, and it will update in real time as things changes. And then the rest of the code is really just how to handle the buttons, because we have two buttons here. You see there's a plus and there's a logout. The plus creates a new project. So let's create one, and let's say we could create a shopping list. Oh, I'm not spelling this correctly. So we got a shopping list, but no tasks. That's kind of boring. So we can click on it, and then this takes us to a new one. So basically what you will see is that when you click on it, you go to the item view controller. And the item view controller is basically the exact same thing. It creates this list of that you can show with the table view. The only real difference is that what it shows is the content of that project. So it just shows those list of items. Again, the exact same binding happening. There's no difference. It's the exact same as before, where you basically bind the inserts and deletes and updates to the UI. And I'll show more interesting why that binding is so interesting. You can say, well, we're doing all this stuff ourselves. Why don't we just update the UI when it happens? Well, that's because the changes might come from other sources as well. But let's create this shopping list and say we want to buy some milk, some whatever, carrots, and some cereal. Oh, this does well there. So we have a basic shopping list. And the interesting thing, if you look at this whole app is, there's like 6 files here. None of them have very much code in it. What we're doing, we're creating this main delegate that basically starts the app. That's almost no code. Then we create a view controller that allows you to show the first login. Just a few lines of code showing the login field. We create our models. Again, almost no code. And it might look like more than it is because it's a huge font right now, but it's really like almost no code. The only one that has a little bit of code is the project view controller, which shows the list of to-do lists and projects, and the item view controller, which actually shows the items. But even those have hardly any code in it. I mean, as you can see, this is the highest, like, huge font, and it's still maybe like 6 pages of code. And really the essence of it is just this way we connect it to the UI. So the interesting part of this is say, okay, now we have a small app, we can make it a to-do list locally, but that's not that interesting, right? Because that's all local. and we're just doing it on the phone. The good thing is that all of what we saw for right now worked even when you're offline, because you have the full database on the phone. So you could connect, you can create this shopping list, you can do edit it, you can do everything, and it works even if you can read your old lists. Perfect when you're out shopping and there's no connectivity in the supermarket or wherever you are. It just works. But the interesting things happens when you have connectivity. And luckily, we hopefully have connectivity here. So what I can do is I can actually log into the cloud service, the Realm cloud. So in this case here, I'm going in, I'm going to log into the cloud instance I created for this thing. So if you look in the scene delegate, you might not have noticed when I did the view controller here in the beginning. It has a URL that tells it which server is it logging into to begin with. This one, it's just called MPD London. So this is the server I authenticated against, where I created the user and actually where I've created these project things. I can use this tool, which is called Realm Studio, and I can use that to log into the same server and look at what data I have. I can look at the users I created. That's me, and then there's John, which was the user I just created. I logged in. And then I can look at the realms. So right now, there's only one realm. I hope you can read up there, but it's just called the default realm. So let's try to open that. OK, so what you can see here is you can see a few different things. It'll be interesting if you look at the same time as this. So what you can see here is you can see the different classes that are inside this realm. There's items, there's projects. And since the items are selected, you can see the list of current items. And you can see that corresponds to the ones over there in this shopping list. You can also see there's one project. There's a shopping list. And interesting enough, this is the list of all items. And so if there had been multiple users, you would see all the mix of every item created by everybody here. But the project had a list itself of the specific items in this. So let's open that list, for example, if you look at this. So this is the list within the project. You can see that over here on the side where you can see that your project, you open the list underneath it. So what is the difference about this? Well, first of all, if you look from the outside, just a list of items, that's just the items. This one actually is an array, so this is ordering. And this is where we can start seeing some of the magic of this. Since on the phone, we have bound this UI to the actual data. And you can say, well, even ahead of time, we don't really have to think about what we want to do with this data, because everything that happens to this data will automatically be reflected in the UI. So you could do stuff like saying, well, actually, I want the carrots are more important than the cereal. Let's move those up. And as you see, even if I'm just manipulating this using the studio, which connects to the cloud, and I didn't add any code that could drag and drop stuff in the app itself. There was no such thing. It was more like, oh, well, it's just like it reflects the data in the list, and I move stuff in the list, and it will move around. So I can kind of happily move this around. And it will even animate it, as you can see in this, because, again, it's bound directly there. It knows that this is a move. This should be animated. I can go back to my item, and I can say, if let's say it's my son got access to this, and suddenly he wants to do chocolate milk instead. And you see everything, when you work with Realm, everything is live. Again, if you look at this, the phone, and you look at the update I do here, everything, if I remove the chocolate milk again, that's really unhealthy. You can see it instantly updates in the UI. Again, that's not something I had to code. There's no code doing this in the app itself. I just connect it. I have a list of items. I connect that to the table view. So every change that happens on any other device in the world, all as I'm doing here, like manipulating directly in the cloud, is automatically propagated out to to every device that looks at it in real time, fully interactive. And again, this is of course this is a simulator, but it's still running exactly like a real phone. It has to connect through like our Wi-Fi to the cloud and everything to do this. And everything is live, and the same the other way around. You can see if I connect here and let's select this one, say I already shopped this one. You can see the other way. It's probably not, but if you look at the is done, you will see that change from true to false, or false to true, and the other way around again as I click. And I can do the same back and forth. I can say this one to true, and it will update. So one question. Yes, it's real time. I mean, that's the whole point. You can do games with this. You can do like stuff that's real time. And yes, the protocol is WebSockets underneath. So this mobile device has a WebSocket connection to the cloud. And actually, the Realm Studio has that as well. Realm Studio is an Electron app that you run. So they both have WebSocket connections, and again, if you have like thousands of devices, they will all have WebSocket connections, and that's why they're instant live updating on every little change you do. So you can connect that. Any other questions? Over here, now we have a. Okay, a little bit louder. You can to some extent. So the question was, can we make it a user decision to sync? You can turn sync off and on. Basically, like if you want to like conserve battery for a while or don't know Wi-Fi, then you can turn it off. But in general, we don't advise against. We basically say, well, let the system handle that and synchronize whenever you have the ability to do so. That also prevents like getting big spikes of all kind of data coming in all the time. But yes, you can do it if you want to. What do you say? Can you higher, louder? Good point. So with synchronization, do you have to pull for changes or does it get pushed to it? It will push the changes to the device. That's the point of saying like with the WebSocket connection. It has a WebSocket connection and it will basically push data on demand. And it will also, there's many other benefits. It will actually try to push as little data as possible. So that it just basically just sends the smallest possible delta of what was changed, so that you conserve battery and bandwidth, and also so you can get it through even if you have spotty connectivity. So a few interesting things here. Let's look at this. Go back to this app again. One thing is that if I shut down this app, let's try to shut it down with this. If I shut it down and then I start it again, you'll see that it goes back to where it was. And even if I go a bit more aggressive here, and I actually really kills it, see how I do this in this one. This one was an old one. And then, so now it's totally killed. I'll start it again, and it'll know where it was, right? Again, everything's persistent, all the stuff. And again, I didn't have to write a single line of code to do that. It makes sure that it persists the state, who was logged in, is he still logged in, what was his data, all that stuff. It's all there. It's all instant, and even if in this case, if he was offline when he goes in, because he already is logged in, he can. The first time you log in, you have to get online because otherwise, cannot know if you exist or not. But if you have already logged in, it will actually work even when you're offline. Even if they haven't been totally shut down, you can open it and like you can go and you can start working with your data. So this is really the interesting. Also for this, let's see if we can. I don't really want to turn off on the Wi-Fi, but let's try something else fun. We can choose to log out. Oh. Here we go. So now we logged out, and again, if we shut down the app, it'll come to this state. This as a new user, and then we can log in and we can create a new user again. So we got a new user, and again we have Realm Studio. We can go into the studio and we can look for users. Let's take the window here. And you can look at users that we just created, this gym user. And as you see here, he does not have any projects, right? I mean, he might also want to have a shopping list. Let's just call this one, let's call it Jim's shopping list. It has no tasks. But as you can see live over here, it pops up again. And suddenly we have 2 shopping lists. And we can create, let's go in there, and he's a bit more, he just wants some beer. Right, so the interesting is now you go back to the items, and you can see here's all the stuff that anybody has on their shopping lists, the whole list of it. But each user can only see his own stuff. You see querying. And this uses something we call query-based sync, which basically makes sure that it's only the user's own stuff that gets synchronized to the device. So when John logs in and he gets his stuff, he does not get the like Jim's shopping list as well. It never gets sent to his device. It never leaves the cloud. He only gets his own shopping list. And the same with John. But this is actually, there's a lot of stuff you get for free. One of the big things that people want to do is say, well, you want to do collaboration. So let's say that Jim and John, they actually want to, they need to do some party together and do some shopping, right? So they had beer. Maybe they both have to say, well, what if we could both go and buy the beer? And you say, how would you do that if you say, well, we actually would want that beer to be in both shopping lists at the same time, simultaneously? That could be pretty cool. And maybe we can actually make this really cool. Let's try something fun here. I'm just going to try to create a new instance here and see if we can have two devices at the same time. So what I just did was I started a new simulator, and let's, on this one, we log in as John. So again, we have two different users, each on their own device, each logged in, they have the shopping list. And then I'm going to cheat again. This is a function that would be super easy to build in the app, but right now I'm just going to cheat and do it in Realm Studio, because then I don't have to do any code. And Studio is very flexible. It allows me to do all kind of cool stuff. So what I want to do is I want just to add the beer to John's list as well. So what I do is I go to John's project. I open the list here. And then I'm going to say, let's add an existing item to this. And we're going to add this one here, the beer. So now we're in this interesting situation where both users have the same item. They each have their own shopping list, but they're sharing a single item. And again, this is one of the interesting thing about Realm as a data model, like a database data model, that Realm is an object database. So, and that means that every object is an entity in itself. That's kind of unique. If you're used to MongoDB, for example, in this case, probably each shopping list would have been a document. And there's really no way to have like one sub-item in a document be both places at the same time in two documents. That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't really compute in any way, right? Because each document is its own entity. In Realm, that doesn't matter. You can have documents, but in principle, you can have the same objects be in multiple documents at the same time, which is what I just did. I just added this exact same object to two different documents, two different projects in this case, or to-do lists. And you can see that they're connected. If let's say we go down shopping, and John is one getting down there first, and he starts to buy it, and he say, "Oh, I bought this." He clicks, and as you can see, it instantly updates in both apps. So we can collaborate, and maybe Jim can be really annoying and turn it off again, or whatever he wants. Everything is just live updating. Somebody can go in here and then they can say, well, we want to change, so we can actually see what's going on here. And we can go in and we can say, he actually wants to change this to lots of here, right? And instantly updates on for everybody who looks at it. Mm-hmm. Good question. So the question was kind of like, what is the relation to Realm, the database, to the app you build, and what if multiple people open the like Realms, are they getting the same database? Are they getting different instances? And the answer is it depends on how you open it. So the Realm is a super flexible thing. Again, it's an on-device native database, so it actually runs on the device. And you can run that totally native. Actually, the Realm itself, the database, is open source, just like MongoDB. And you can run it totally standalone with no dependencies whatsoever. And if you do that, then you can open just a local instance. You can just give it a file path, and it'll just be a local instance on that single device specific for that app. And you can open as many of those as you want. But the magic comes, what I did in this app was when I opened the Realm, I gave it, instead of giving it a file path, I gave it a URL. And that URL pointed to like a common Realm that is shareable. So that means that everybody who opens that Realm, they get the same data. So in this case, I had two different, well, it's the same app, but I've logged in as two different users, and they both have opened the same Realm. And in this sense, again, you can have as many realms as you want, also shared realms. It makes sense to think of them kind of like Dropbox, in that anything you put into a realm, you can put objects into it. Anything you put into, well, everybody else who have that same realm open, they will see that instantly. Every change that happens, they will see that instantly. And again, they can bind it directly to the UI so that every change just propagates, gets shown right away with zero delay.
You said that if Jim creates an item in this shopping list, it's his item. His item, is it a property on the item itself in the database somewhere?
Yes, so
Because if it is, then how will users from another application know about this
yes.
Jim?
Yes, so that's a really good question because I went a bit quick over that. So the question is, okay, we have this database, contains all these objects, and suddenly we're talking about this user's objects or this user's objects. How do we actually differentiate? And I gave like only mentioned it a little bit, but I'm actually cheating a little bit in this app for ease of use. Right now, in this app, there's not really any security. It's more like security by obscurity or whatever you could call it. Since I have both Jim and John coming in here, with the data, what they do is they just search for the ID. So when you look at in Studio, here we see the projects. The project has an owner, which is basically the user ID. And when I create the app, let me show exactly why that happens. When I open the app, what I do is I say I only want the projects with the current user ID. This is why I do this. So I basically do a filter that says owner, this one, owner has to be equal to what is called, this weird thing here will be replaced with this variable, which is the identity of the current user. And that, in effect, that means that when John connects, he will get this project because that matches his ID. When Jim connects, he will get this project because it matches his ID. And there could be many of these. So that was me, again, doing it manually. I just dragged it between them. You could do it in the app. So I'll show it again. So what I did, and I'll say again, this is, again, from a security perspective, there's no security here, right? It's just, the only security is that I know my ID. But in principle, you could search for everybody, you could find it. But the little thing you might notice out here on the side is that Realm actually also has a full permission system. Right now, it's just everything is allowed, but you can actually give like who can read and write and update individual objects. So if you're building a production app, I would actually add permissions to these so that only the owner could open this specific objects. So if I did that, then we need a few hours more of this tutorial. So I haven't done that, but it does full permission system, so you can actually at the object level, so you can control who have access to what. But going back to this, how did I share the beer entry between both of them? So they have each project has a list of the items that is in this to-do list. And Jim was the original one that had this lots of beer entry, which was just called beer at that point in time. And what I did was that basically I manually went to John's list. So going back to projects, and I went to John's shopping list here. I went into the specific list here. And then I just manually added it. So in Studio, there's a function where when you have a list, you can just click and you can say add an existing object. And it gives you like a list of all the objects in the system, and you can choose to add that to that list. And again, this is not limited by whether this list was in this document or project or whatever. This allows you to add any object in the whole system to this list. And again, so the same object can be referenced from multiple lists, unlimited number of lists actually. So that's actually because Realm is an object database, which probably in kind of like the types of database, it's almost closer to a graph database than to a document database, that everything can be interconnected in very flexible ways. So it's very powerful, especially if you want to do this kind of collaborative apps, that you can do like very granular sharing, that you say, oh, this little object has like just 2 properties, I want to share this with this guy and this with this guy, and you just give people access to it, and it works, and all changes are propagating automatically.
It can be done programmatically also.
Yes, it can easily be done programmatically. It's no problem at all. It's a bit easier by hand now than spending time coding it, but yes, it's super easy to do it. I mean, it's actually almost easier in that it's just add to list. If you have the object, you just add it to the list, just insert as normal, and it will be there. Super easy.
Yeah, if the database is syncing all the time, how is that affecting battery consumption?
Yeah. It actually makes it use less battery, which is very surprising. The thing you find out is that when you have one open WebSocket connection, because of the way it's implemented in the operating system, it just hangs on the kind of the basic carrier band. It doesn't really have to do all kind of connectivity all the time. It just waits for something to happen, as long as you just keep it steady open. Where compared to if you're doing polling all the time, like say you poll like every second, then you have to put the cellular engine has to go up and down all the time. So that actually turns out to use more energy, which is kind of surprising. But it's one of these kind of funny mobile effects.
In my case, it's kind of not the case that I would call. I would rather do that.
Yeah.
In my case, it's more like someone talked about before, that you have you periodically sync, like you have a save, right?
Yeah.
So I would rather like sync once or poll.
Yeah. I mean, you can do that, as I said. You can turn off synchronization,
Yeah.
and then it'll just basically just not touch the network, and it just won't do anything. You can still do changes locally. You can do everything you want, and then when you turn it on again, if you have connectivity at that point in time, it will synchronize back and forth whatever changes has happened in the meantime.
Yeah, but then I need to make sure that it has connectivity at that time. So I guess there are still reasons for keeping it on anyway.
I mean, the good thing about keeping it on is that it will on its own notice when there's connectivity, and it will just synchronize data like back and forth when needed. And since it's just, sometimes it's also just a nice user experience because it means it sends smaller bits at a time. And so if you have kind of spotty connectivity where you only get like a few bytes through every time, that it's kind of nice that it can just kind of like zip them through as if the opportunity is there.
But are there any like measurements on the battery impact? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. We don't have any public measurements, at least. I know there's been a few research papers around it, which basically on like polling versus like having the open connection and those kind of things.
Okay.
Cool. Cool. Any other questions? There's one back there.
Sorry. Yeah, you mentioned that the synchronization needs to happen with the Realm Cloud client. Is there any way of having cross-application or cross-device synchronization without the Realm Cloud?
So basically, the question is, can you do synchronization without having the Realm Cloud? So more like kind of peer-to-peer synchronization.
Yeah, or hosting it locally in some way or another, or on your own infrastructure, should you not be able to use public infrastructure?
Yes, so the Realm Cloud, we also support an on-prem version of that. So you can self-host, and we have people doing that both for security reasons, just like old legacy reasons, and also sometimes because you have to be able to run it the cloud. You need like the hub to be local somewhere that has its own connectivity problems. So that's definitely a possibility. We do not support like direct peer-to-peer synchronization between devices.
Okay. And out of curiosity, what's the underpinning data store on mobiles? Is it kind of local store, or is it using a proprietary kind of data format for storing the data on the device?
Can you restate that a bit
sorry,
louder?
I'll put it a bit closer. Which kind of data store is it using on the devices themselves? Is it a local store or some proprietary data format or something like that?
So the question is like, what storage formats do we use on the device? Well, what we use is Realm itself. Realm is a full database.
Okay.
And it runs on the device. It's full local. It's not a layer on top of anything.
Okay.
It's a real object database built from the ground up that is used for all storage on the device.
Cool.
Fully native.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. That's a question coming there.
Is there a way to share the database between applications currently with Realm?
Can you restate that? It's really hard to hear.
Is there a way to make the database global on the device, or does it have to be within the application?
So I'm not sure if I exactly get it, but the database itself is a part of the application. You embed it in the application, and it works from there. There are things you can do to like share between devices, to share between apps, so they can share the same database. It's a bit cumbersome on most platforms because They're doing a lot to isolate and sandbox apps between each other for security reasons. I don't know if that was the exact answer for the question. Almost.
So I've got an architecture question. So presumably, because you're obviously broadcasting all of your changes and in like micro segments of differentials, the load on the Realm Cloud is going to be substantially lower than it would be if you're polling it from loads of different devices. Would you say that your app should go only to Realm, and then if you've got other third-party services and stuff like that, they push into Realm, as opposed to your app retrieving from third-party services and then have to write to Realm? It's more of a best practice sort of question.
Yeah, so as a best practice question, should all communication go through Realm, or should you have like side channels, whatever, REST APIs and stuff on the side? You should recommend that you do everything through Realm, because then you get all the benefits of the connectivity tolerance. So if you have third-party services, like whatever you use Stripe or whatever you use, communicating through an object instead of a REST request means that you remove a lot of complexity in your app. You don't have to handle error conditions, you don't have to do any of all that stuff. You just post the object, and whenever you get connectivity, the server will see that, and then the server can connect from react on that, and it can connect to a backend service, and they can update the object with the result of the request. So that's usually, and the same thing also to third-party databases. We have connectors, so you can connect the Realm to that. The obvious one is MongoDB. That's in closed beta right now. We also have SQL Server and Postgres connectors. So you can connect to a third-party database.
Thanks.
Can you please clarify the concept of object? Because you have like project contains objects, and then you kind of related several objects. No, you related one object to several projects. But what kind of relations are possible between objects, I don't know, between projects, or do you need this hierarchy? What's on this matter?
A really good question. So the point is, how does objects actually work in Realm? Compared, especially for those of you who are used to documents, which has very specific semantics. Like a document is a group of objects, but they all have to be in a tree structure. So you have like a parent object, which has any number of children, which can have any number of children, but it has to be in a tree. And there can be it's not like the same, you cannot have like two sub-objects pointing to the same child. That's weird. You cannot have, if you have each group, you cannot have, again, stuff shared between two different documents. With Realm, it's much more granular. So you have objects, and the only rule with objects is that, they can point to other objects. And there's a schema, so it's not schemaless like Mongo, but the schema just tells the format. So if you look at this, let's look at the project, for example, here. And we look at this in Realm Studio. You can see basically you can see the schema here on top. You see there's a project ID, which is a string. It will always be there. There's an owner, which is a string. Name, that's a string. Timestamp, that's a string. And then there's a list of items. And you can see this basically set down here. It's items, and then the brackets denotes that this is the list. So that's just a list. This list can contain, it basically has the equivalent of pointers of references to these objects. So from this list, you can point to any item of the item type. And the best equivalent to say it's exactly like in your programming language. Realm objects are like objects in your programming language. And that's why it's different from documents. Like documents don't work like how your programming language works. If you work in JavaScript and you create an object of some kind, let's say you create an item object, and then you create a to-do list that can point to items, JavaScript doesn't put any restrictions on which item object you could reference from that project list. It doesn't care. It's just a reference. You can reference any object. And especially in JavaScript, it doesn't even care about the type, but in a typeful language, type language, it would just care about the type. But you can create a pointer of reference to any object as long as the type fits. And that's the same in Realm. Realm works exactly like your programming language, like any object on your programming language.
So this is like just, let's say, pointer, a relation. It doesn't have properties. It just means that both lists can see and update this object. I
Yes.
mean, it's
So-
not that this can only update and this can only read.
No. So the way to think of a list, it's just like in any other programming. If you're doing a list, an array in JavaScript, and it contains a list of items, and you create another array, and you just add some of the same items to this other array. Right? That's something you can easily do in JavaScript. Won't be any problem. If you go through one array and then you update one of these items, the
It's
objects,
updated for everyone.
yeah, everybody else will see those updates because they're referencing the same objects, right? It's just references. That's the same in Realm. It's not. They don't have their own copy of these objects. They're just referencing the same object directly. So again,
Starting to
it's
make
kind of a
sense.
philosophical thing that the whole idea with Realm was to design something that worked exactly like your programming language. So you don't even feel you're working with a database. It works just like any other programming does, except it gives you all these cool new capabilities of live sharing, queries, persistence, all that cool stuff. But the semantics are exactly the same as any other object in your programming language. It is a bit of a mind bender in the beginning when you start with it, and you're like, whoa, suddenly I can do anything I want.
Your example, a beer object can contain inside himself references to something else or cannot.
It could contain reference to itself, no problem. I mean, but in this case, I mean, again, there's a schema. In this case, if you look at the item, it just contains an item ID and a string and a boolean and a date. So there's no reference there. But in principle, it could have a reference to other items, either as a single reference or as a list of references. There's nothing that prevents you to do circular references where things reference themselves. There's no problem with that. It's fine.
Just a point of clarification on the previous issue. You say you've explained how entity relationship works. How about structural relationships, like inheritance?
Can you restate that? It's a bit. The sound system is a bit weird, so it's kind of has to be pretty loud to hear.
Sorry, yeah. You've explained entity relationships, so this object has links to this object, but how about structural relationships like inheritance? So this object contains all of the properties from a previous one, but has a different structure to it appended to the end of it.
Cool, got it. Yeah. So the question is, we have linked relationships where you can have reference to other objects. What about like polymorphic relationships or like inheritance? And Realm has very limited support of inheritance. You can derive a class from another class, and it will inherit the properties. That's more of like a shortcut to inherit those properties. But it does not have polymorphism in the sense that then if you do a search for that class, they will work as two independent classes, not as a full. That's actually one of the things, if you saw Elliot's keynote, that is one of the things that's on the roadmap now after the MongoDB acquisition. Now that we have more resources, is to add true inheritance as well. But currently it is not there. I mean, only as a shortcut you can create classes derived from others, but it just means that you get the same fields. It does not mean that they will work as subsets of each other as a full class. Cool.
So would you integrate with Mongo? How will you handle this problem with objects and that can be associated with any other object? How do you handle this relation and non-relationship database and I guess the structure you have here?
Well, so if I got that correctly, the question was how, when we are integrating with Mongo, which is a big thing for Realm right now, how do we handle the difference in these data models, given that you have like the document model and the like object model, and I will say slightly painfully so. In some sense, it's actually easy, since the object model is a superset of the document. You can represent any document as objects. The challenge is just to keep people from doing stuff they're not supposed to do in document model. So it's no problem to model a document. Like here, that was what I did initially here. I create a project, and then I just add like items underneath it. And as long as I do that, that's a perfectly valid document. The problem comes when I do the magic thing and I start pulling objects between them and share them between them. And in a Mongo context, you basically don't do that. That's not something Mongo can handle. It's not something the document model can handle. You can do a different kind of data modeling where you split it up individual and use like manual references instead. It's a bit cumbersome, but it's doable. But in general terms, as long as the data comes from Mongo, which is a lot of the data we work with right now, is you have an existing huge Mongo database with stuff that's in document format, that all pulls right into Realm. It's no problem. I mean, you can represent that, no problem in Realm. And then we just put in a few barriers then that make sure that you don't do anything that would break the document model when you go back the other way. So it's, in that sense, it's not too bad. I mean, it'll be a little bit restrictive, but if you're used to working with Mongo, I mean, you won't notice anyway, since there's no new restrictions. It's just compared to what Realm can do. Did that answer the question? Cool.
There is no concept of transactional updating several objects.
Yes. Everything is transactional. Actually, there's no other way.
I mean transactional updating several objects.
Yes. That's the only way to do it. I mean, every update you do to Realm has to be done in a transaction. And you can update as many objects as you want within one transaction. Again, just like Mongo transactions.
Or not in this manner. You update all objects or you update none of them?
Yes, exactly. It's full asset. Same scenario, right?
Cool.
Let me show. There should be a code sample of how, since I am actually doing stuff in this one. So let's say when we create a new project, we'll see if we can find the actual code that does it. Here we go. This is probably not the best example since it's only updating a single object. But if you look at this code, which is what happens when you click the create project button in the UI, it will do this, which is basically starting a write transaction. And as you can see, this is again in Swift, but it calls the Realm and then it says do a write. And then everything that's within the scope of this write will be done in the transaction. And you can do anything in there. I mean, right now it's again not the best example because it's only doing a single thing. It just adds this one project object. So slightly boring. But in principle, you could do 100 things. You could read, you can write, you can create objects, you can delete objects. You can, again, relate objects to each other in arbitrary ways. Everything within that transaction. And it's a full transaction. Nobody else, no other threads are going to see this until you're done. No other devices are going to see that until it has committed. The full asset. I mean, so everything's transactional. And literally, like the only way you can change data is through transactions. And it is a really critical aspect of also how working locally on the device with concurrency and working between threads. They utilize that all the time. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, well then let's wrap up for now. We can end a bit earlier, and then again, I'll be down at the booth down there. So if anybody has specific questions, you're welcome to come up to me and chat afterwards. Cool. Thank you.